We are live. Nothing better than a freshly brewed cup of coffee. Welcome to another episode of What's in Your Cup. I am Brian, the CEO's Pops, and this is episode 116. For 116 weeks, we have come to you every hump day and shared a cup of coffee to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the reptile community, and more often than not, more specifically, the ball python world. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for being a morning misfit and jumping in the chat so early. My goodness, we got a few 5 o'clockers up in here. Boards Exotic Reptiles. Ha! I'm finally first. Well, ha! You weren't. Will's Hella Heat. He takes the first spot today, guys. And he leaves a reference to yesterday. Is this the What's in Your Butt Plug morning show? Google it. If you don't know what he's talking about, I don't know what to tell you. Google it. But Boards Exotic Reptiles, that would make you second place. And if you need a first in your pocket, that would make you the first loser, because second place is the first loser. But good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome. I'm glad you guys joined us. What is up? Kevin is in the house. Sugar Skull Serpents, as you may or may not have noticed, there's been some shifts on my crown here, your podcaster's favorite crown. And Sugar Skull Serpents is now a jeweled pin on your podcaster's favorite podcaster's crown. So good morning, and thank you again. He is still recovering from last night. Last night was a good time for those of you that joined us last night. What an amazing turnout. I mean, definitely more than I was expecting. I had a good time, hung out with the Fat Man and hung out with the, we're going to have to come up with a name for him. I call him Kangaroo, Captain Kangaroo, Crocodile Dundee, Lizard Boy. He doesn't like any of those. He doesn't like any of those monikers. So we're gonna have to figure out something cool for the guy from down under, Lizard Morse, who probably hasn't slept because he's on an 18-hour time difference. So the show last night would have been, I believe, around noon. So it's probably around 11 o'clock. He's probably putting on his PJs now and getting ready for bed. Maybe a nightgown. I don't know what he wears. Will defending his first spot. Good morning, Sea of Serpents. Nice to see you, Stan. Let's see here. Old Man Pies and Clowns. Okay, I kind of like that. Saying good morning to everyone but the host. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Jay Quintana, what is going on? Enigmatic keeps me on my toes on Instagram. Old man says he will be next. He will be first next time. Well, I don't know. None of you are not going to say hello to me. I mean, I'm going to pretend you weren't even there. Good morning, good people. So I don't know if Rising Phoenix Reptiles has been in this chat before. If Jamie thinks you guys are good people. You guys are very chatty. So Old Man Pies, well, it's on. Snake and the Fat Man, they're all doing a podcast together. That was some funny-ish. You have to go watch. Guys, it's all a matter of opinion, okay, whether or not you find it funny. I was being picked on yesterday. I felt like Jason. Okay, so I've apologized to Jason before for my antics and my abuse. And for those of you that don't know, there are 100 episodes of a Friday night live I used to do with my co-host Jason of Canadian Reptile Adventures. You can follow the playlist on this channel. There's also 100 episodes of Bowling with Brian, which was a Thursday night live. So please feel free to go and check out the old stuff. I have people DMing me that they just started going through old lives and they really enjoy it, and that's awesome. And some people want me to bring it back, and some people ask why I stopped. It takes its toll. It takes its toll. I still haven't recovered from last night. You don't understand the mental anguish of sharing that time with these two animals. My gosh, it's scary when I'm the level-headed trying to make sure we're as close to PC as possible, and it's just not happening with those guys. Good morning, PD Reptiles. Dr. Joe, Kingdom Pythons had a hilarious night. He enjoyed it. Paul, my homie, Large Marge Morphs didn't even want overtime money. No, never mess with the money. The shows are always there, guys. You can always go back and watch it. I believe like over 500 people tuned in. Awesome, just an awesome turnout, and so far the feedback has been pretty good feedback from last night. We have another Canadian, speaking of Canadians in the house. Good morning to Mutation Creation, has been showing plenty of love lately, and today's topic is interesting because Mutation Creation put out a response to the video, which is the hot topic and which we'll be discussing today, on whether or not racks, I dubbed it racks ruin royals, since they refer to the ball pythons as royals. And I'm glad more people are responding, because we just assume that everyone knows better. And I think we know when it comes to in my construction industry, we're kind of like the lower tier, you know, bottom of the totem pole. I think when it comes to the reptile world, us ball python people are kind of on the bottom of the totem pole too. If you want to debate that, let's do it. But in my experience, that's what I've seen. Right? You got somebody without two nickels to rub together and somehow get their hands on two snakes, and they want to pair them, and they don't even know if they're the same sex or not. It's the stuff we deal with. But yeah, last night was a good time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I always have a good time with Chris. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff the Fat Man and I talk about is from a different era, a different perspective. And you're not supposed to speak freely, even if it's in jest. We're living in this PC world, and I'll be quite frank, even though my name is Brian, I'll be quite frank. It's very frustrating when you were raised in a different era and people weren't so sensitive. We're living in an overly sensitive world, which we're having ramifications from it. Okay, so if you want to see some old school humor and people having a good time, and you have tough skin, go check out last night's show. Uh, we'll be doing it every other Tuesday, and it's with Chris of Snakes and the Fat Man and Luke of Lizard Morphs joining us from Australia, all the way from down under. He's the most reckless, which is kind of scary considering that he's co-hosting with Chris and myself. So very, very, very scary. My man, Balls and Strikes, Low Life. Let's see. We'll go through a couple more. Return of the Mac. We got to go international. What is up? And then I got my Boricua brethren up in here, all the way from Puerto Rico. Then we got Eric's Morse Factory. I mean, that's pretty much another world, Florida, right? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Superstar VIP. Killy's Morphs. How are you? Hashtag Q. Congratulations to hashtag Q for winning the AJ's Exotics giveaway. That's a pretty cool giveaway. He got himself hatchling rack. Uh, what else you got there? Thermostat, snake or two. Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. Can't deny it. So Large March Mo says, Brian, it was a great show last night. Plus, your hair was glowing. And these guys made jokes about my hair. Obviously, Chris is probably going bald under that top hat and just jealous of my long locks. And someone said his hair looked dirty. So I don't think he appreciated that too much. And they made fun of my gray stripe. Okay, guys, it was abusive. Last night was abusive. Speaking of the abuser, right there he goes, right there. Very, very abusive last night. He's an abusive man. Oh my gosh, there goes the other one. Look at that. Abusive. Go Google it. You'll see what it means, okay? Billy, you are still not a morning misfit. We have to work on it. Well, you're a misfit though. You're a misfit. You're probably the worst of everyone here, but not a morning misfit yet. But you're doing well. You're definitely doing well. All right, Will's Hella Heat, my brother. I have not seen you. I miss you. Hope all is well. Happy birthday to the princess, the big six. Before you know it, she'll be graduating college, and you'll be having to deal with the boyfriend situation, which sucks. We have some Canadians up in here, Wayne and Alice Pravada. God, you guys turned out. Love to see you all. Of course, I gotta hit up my brother right there, Ancestral Royal Pythons, who still has. So the other giveaway is done, but Ancestral Royal Python still has his giveaway. Let's get Ancestral Royal Pythons to 2,500 followers. Let's help Jason get there, and he has an amazing female to give away. I'll throw in a T-shirt. I'll throw in some swag. Let's get that. Let's get it into 2,500. Okay. I don't even think I'm at 2,500, but I don't. I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm happy with my friends. Snakes and Doggies is the racist police. Couldn't make a comment without Snakes and Doggies calling you a racist last night. There we go. Brian's coffee cup is racist. Third Eye, what's up? All right, guys. So welcome all of you. If I didn't shout you out, it's only because we have to get on with the show. Definitely interesting topic. It's been the hot topic for the last couple of weeks, and we have to do our normal morning misfit shenanigans here. Okay, those guys making fun of your hair were probably racist. I'm actually used to older people though, not Luke. Luke is still young. He might be good for a few more years with his head of hair, but it's usually older guys that have jokes about my hair. It's a hot commodity at my age. I'm half a century old. So, all right. So real quick, don't be a creep. If you haven't done it yet, go hit the like button, guys. If this is your first time watching the show, hit the subscribe button. There's a good chance that you'll enjoy this channel. I would say at least more than, I'm going to say 70% of the other channels out there. Okay. I'll say at least that much. For those who don't know who I am, like I mentioned, I am Brian, the CEO's Pops, and every show for the last few shows, to tell you a little bit about who I am, we started playing a game called 6 Degrees of Snakeatorium. So far, we've had some interesting entries, and this one was extremely odd and came out of left field. And it was entered by my homie Jose of Grab Your Balls, who has been one of the most humble, quietest influencers in this ball python community. Good chance, if you've been around, you've seen this logo, you know who this person is. There are things that he's done that people are doing now where you think they started it, but no, like I think there's some sort of wake and bake and snaking or wake and bake with snakes or something like that. Jose was waking and baking and snaking a long time ago with some of the bigger names in the community, and they were just cheech and chong in it, talking snakes. So, and there's a lot of other things besides all the other people that are grabbing their balls today. He's done a lot of stuff here that he just does quietly, unlike me, where I make a lot of noise. But this clown submitted this lovely lady, Joan Rivers. He had a video, a meme of her, and it was interesting because while we're talking about living in this snowflake society, this woman would be crucified, even though well, Jesus was Jewish too, but even though she was Jewish, she would be crucified today for the things that she said. You were not safe in the presence of Joan Rivers. I mean, gosh, the tongue lashing she would give you anywhere from your fashion sense or lack of to any other topic that she felt like she was not scared, all 90 pounds of her. So last week, one of the connections for last week was an Emmy through my friend who's a producer, but we're not going to go that way, even though Joan Rivers did win an Emmy. But after doing research, I figured she had to have won a Grammy, and she did win a Grammy. Okay, one of her comedy albums won a Grammy. She may have won more than one. Maybe she won one of her books. I'm not sure. So I did want to talk about this amazing person who connects me, who also won a Grammy, and it is the phenomenal, the amazing Milton Johan Restituyo, aka Al Cover. I had the good fortune of meeting this young man when he was 15. He was the A in a producer group called A&X. He was the first Spanish act that joined the hip hop shop, and they made their presence known at their first performance. In the bottom left picture, you see him there with the CEO when he was first born. You see him a couple of years back, and then in the other photo, you see him with me at an event where we actually recognized him and a few other members of the hip hop shop that were doing great things. He has won Grammys. He won a Grammy for his production, and now as a singer, he was nominated for a Grammy. And if you look up Al Cover, he has just done some of the most amazing stuff. He's won other awards, BMI, Billboard, etc. Just phenomenal to have this man in my life. I managed him as a young artist when I was in the music industry, and we just have a great relationship. And I'm very, very happy that he's maintained that relationship and continues to pay it forward with Samson. Even have a video clip from last year or about a year and a half ago, when we went to Florida and we hooked up, and he was teaching Samson how to do music. It was one of Samson's homework assignments. So it's pretty cool. So my connection to Joan Rivers is connected through the Grammys, through Al Cover. If you get a chance, go look him up. Go see some of the great things that he's done. For those of you that know the song, very, very famous song, Danza Kuduro or Danza Kuduro, he is the one who produced it. And you always hear them say A&X in the beginning. Fast and Furious used it. ESPN, it was the number one Zumba song, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So that was very interesting. That's why they put her to sleep. Oh no. Gosh, you guys are horrible. Last night you guys were killing a lot of people off, and we do have to do some follow up, right? Because we were talking about people last night, and they're like, "Oh, he's dead," or was like they talked about Beetlejuice and referred to him in the past tense from Howard Stern's show, and he's still very alive. And we got to find out if Bruce is still alive from the Reptile Expo scene. We definitely Have to find out. But a lot of love here. A lot of love here for um Jose. A lot of love. There you go. I love it. PR Fabio. Samson makes fun of me, and when my hair is out, calls me Fabio or Fatio because I'm fat. You know, little kid's a prick. Jose is an awesome guy. Jose is a legend. That's right, my boy right there with those ASFs, aka snake cakes. Samson was calling them snake cakes too. So I don't know if Jose took that from Samson or if it was just a great minds think alike situation. So yeah, she was definitely off the hook, but that's why they put her to sleep. I don't know. She was definitely a beast. I referred to her as a savage. Yeah, she was no joke. Michael, she called Michelle Michael. I know she referred to women. She would look at women in their outfits and say that outfit would look really nice if it was on a woman, even though it was a woman. She was definitely next level. Okay. She was next level and would not, she'd be chastised today. Unfortunate, because we're living in this world where you're scared to say anything. Okay. This week, if anyone has any ideas what's going on with I have a whole slew. So please keep doing what you're doing and sending in referrals or suggestions for the Milk Carton Chronicles or for the Sticker Breeder Graveyard. We do now have the Sticker Breeder frame that I will be removing stickers to put onto the Sticker Breeder frame because yeah, they're no longer around. Cool stickers. That's what. So Bruce has passed. Oh wow. We're confirming it. Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. Well, there's always a silver lining, and I guess Chris, that means you can go to the shows now. No excuses. You can set up a table at a show, and you don't have to worry about it now. All right. So keep sending in your recommendations for the Milk Carton Chronicles. The Milk Carton Chronicles is for any of these ball python breeders that have just gone missing for a couple of months. No activity on any of their social media. No one's heard from them. And what we're doing is we're putting a word out to see if they're still in it, if they're still around. And this week's Milk Carton Chronicles goes to a couple that was making a lot of noise, and it seemed like they would be around for a while. You know, they never made my 3-year list, and again, maybe there's just so much going on that they've taken a hiatus from social media and they're doing their things quietly. But Niveal Exotics. We used to joke around that Niveal Exotics and Bane of My Exotics had the same logo, and I'm sure neither one of them liked that joke, but if you look at their logos, you see the reference. Hopefully, hopefully they're right, Nick and Jules. Hope all is well, and if you know them, reach out to them and let us know. Are they still in the ball python community, or are they gone? It would be sad. It was a husband wife duo, and again, anytime you have a husband wife duo, I think it's pretty cool. I'm definitely jealous of all the husband wife duos because my wife will not participate or help at all. I remember them. Yes, a lot of people remember them, but that's what I mean. So also the White Plains show is returning and should be back and running soon. Give me dates. If you can't give me dates, I don't want to hear it because it's been returning literally for almost 2 years, and there were dates thrown out before. So please give me dates. All right. Let's stop spreading these White Plains rumors. But I will be at that show. There's no way I won't go to that show, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that the fat man goes as well. Okay. He should be at the one of his favorite shows of all time. Now in the Sticker Breeder Graveyard goes Lucky 7 Reptiles. My gosh, just close down shop. You know, I mean, this was a really cool guy. Awesome sticker. The sticker took a huge real estate. Removing his sticker off of the sticker breeder wall in the back will literally make me have to put like 3 more stickers in there. But things happen, guys. Things do happen. So it is what it is. Before we move on, there's been a lot of alerts going on with USARK. Okay, these are just the alerts from this year. So far this year, there have been 3, 6, 7 alerts this year. Hopefully, you're not one of these people that are talking trash about USARK, yet you're doing nothing to help the cause. Okay, because it just seems to be another hot, popular topic going on where USARK is getting bashed and questioned as far as what do they do. And I'm sure the people that are bashing USARK aren't doing what they should be doing. And as a matter of fact, this just came out as well.
All new at 6, regulating reptiles. At one time, you could own an iguana, but not anymore.
Fox 35's Ken Suarez tells us how reptile lovers are now fighting back against the state's new rules.
You see that one back there?
When Dominic Kennedy was a kid, he had something his son now can't have.
Iguanas are cool. They're really awesome.
Iguanas are on the FWC's prohibited list. So are tegus and Burmese pythons.
You need a permit to
right,
have them.
so we have a special
and
guest,
it is
and
pretty much impossible for anybody to get a new permit at this point.
Family Reptile has a permit, but they're still under lock and key. So why are they back here?
Well, they're back here. We have to have a double door entry coming into with the prohibited species into this room.
They're locked in with a warning sign. Also, they don't escape. Too many non-native species already have. They've nestled into the Everglades and dine on native species. An FWC spokeswoman says non-native species can harm Florida's ecology and economy, as well as human health and safety.
We all agree there's a problem. There's no denying there's not a problem. The problem is how we're fixing it.
Elizabeth Wisniewski says owners should be educated about the damage that non-native species can do if they escape. She says don't ban all of them altogether, but the state has already written a rule that does just that. The United States Association of Reptile Keepers says that is not going to work, so they just filed a motion to throw the rule out.
The state constitution gives FWC authority over wild animal life, and we're saying that the animals that we have are captive animals. They're animals under human care. They do not qualify as wild animal life.
Soon a judge will decide if that argument has any teeth. Ken Suarez, Fox 35 News.
if you think that because you're not in one of the states, if you're not in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Illinois, New York, I don't know if New York had one this year, Washington, Oregon, if you're not in one of the states, Florida, that's always having issues and being threatened with legislation that it won't affect you, just think about this. It's 2023. And in most states in this country, a woman cannot choose to have an abortion. Okay, so just think about that. So if you really think that there cannot be legislation passed to take away your rights to keep and or breed animals, specifically reptiles, you are hugely mistaken. So if you're not doing anything about it, you can't complain when you lose that ability. So I really, really hope more people start taking action. And it's very simple. Go to USARK, go to their website. The link is in every one of my video descriptions. You can go to the alerts and it tells you exactly what you can do. It gives you the name of the alert. It's not difficult. What you have to do is show that we have numbers and our numbers matter, because when it comes to anything to do with elected officials, numbers matter. So email your legislators, fax and mail letters, attend hearings, and voice opposition. Share and encourage others to complete the alerts as well. And guys, don't think that it won't affect you. Okay, please. That is really cool. Jason from Ancestral Royal Python says she is actually the person who first explained ball python genetics to me and made me want to start breeding. That is really, really cool. U.S. Ark is fighting an army with a BB gun. They need all of us. That is a great illustration right there. Just imagine that. Okay, you got this one little G.I. Joe looking guy with a BB gun going up against tanks and bombers and an entire army. Okay, because the amount I had seen someone make a reference about, they have $500,000, and this is U.S. Ark, not U.S. Ark Florida, which are two separate agencies. They do work together at times, but they are two separate nonprofit organizations. And someone referred to $500,000 like a lot of money. And I was just like, wow, it just shows how clueless some people can be on what it takes to fight, to oppose legislators, to oppose these proposed bills. It's pretty sad that someone thinks $500,000 to run an organization that has so many legal fees and court appearances, etc., is a lot of money. So if you're donating $40 a year, please don't think that your money is being abused. It's not. Trust me. And if you cannot afford, again, if you cannot afford a U.S. Ark membership, just DM me if you know someone as well. But I have no issue giving you a U.S. Ark membership to help the cause. I do have an issue if you're still trying to acquire more animals when you can't handle the animals you currently have, just so we're clear about that. Okay? All right, you guys are talking about shows, and more shows. 121 Mutations. What is up, John? I hope you are well. Congratulations on your move to Pennsylvania. Now you are even closer to all the shows that's out there. Tradesman is back. What is good? Calling me Elvis Crespo, saying I look like a bachatero, this guy. All right, so Gettysburg Battlefield. Gettysburg is formerly known as Battlefield. All right, guys. So the membership count. That's a great point. Forward Motion Reptile says the membership count is just as important as the money given, and again, it shows numbers. Okay, it shows that there's so many of us that find this important enough to unite and fight that cause. So I think that's a really, really good point, Gerald. All right, so guys, I did invite Liam Sinclair. Mr. Liam Sinclair is the voice on the video which discusses the ball python brain and the effects of having ball pythons in the rack system. So instead of me trying to misquote him, we'll just hear straight from his mouth. As you know, we like to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the reptile community, and quite often it has to do with perspective. So what I would like is for everyone to have an open mind and welcome our guest, as you've been reaching out to me and asking me my opinions on this topic. Well, who better than to have the person here who's created this hot topic? So without any further ado, I will bring out this week's guest.
Hello.
Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself? Let everyone know who you are, where you're from, and then we'll get into some of this tea that's going on.
Tea. So my name is Liam Sinclair. I started the YouTube channel Reptiles and Research. Basically, it started to look at the science behind reptile care and then bring that forward and then repeat that in a more digestible way to the average keeper, so they don't have to trawl through loads of studies, and they get it in like a really digestible way.
So your name is Liam, but you're British?
Yep, English. Yep.
Oh, you're already all jacked up. Come on, you have an Irish name?
Yeah, a lot of people say they got an Irish name.
Well, my name is Brian, and I'm Puerto Rican, so I guess I'm way off if we look at it that way. And my son, his middle name is Liam as well. So yeah, I guess we won't even worry about the origins of these names. Well, welcome, Liam. Thank you for joining us today. You have been the talk of the reptile town, more specifically Ball Python Street. Why don't you tell us what you did or what you've spoken on recently that's caused all of this buzz?
So I gave a public talk at a local reptile society on basically learning in ball pythons and what can happen in a ball python when they're giving very low opportunities to learn, and what can happen in the most extreme example of a rack that has nothing in it bar a water bowl. And I recorded the public talk and then posted it on YouTube.
Where was that talk held at?
So it was the press, so Portsmouth Reptile and obviously Amphibian Society. It's one of the oldest in the UK.
Okay, excellent. Have you done any talks there prior to this one?
Nope, I took a plunge into the deep end of that topic.
Well, it looks like you came out the box swinging for a home run. Now, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and your credentials that gives you the credibility in giving such a talk?
So I have got a bachelor's degree in applied animal science. Also, I want to stress as well, it's not just me who have put the work in for this. It's just that I'm the one doesn't mind being the loudmouth, apparently.
You're the mouthpiece, and you're the one that's willing to take the brunt.
Yeah, take the brunt of the buzz that comes with it.
The repercussions of going against the grain.
Yes. So my co-host Ellie Hills has also got a bachelor's degree in applied animal science, but she's also got a master's degree in zoo biology. And then our colleague Laurie Torini, who's over the pond with you guys, who does a lot of like training snakes and whatnot, she obviously has a degree also, and she's qualified and everything else. She's done like loads of different little courses for like everything under the sun. So it's a very long list for her. But she did a lot of work for this as well. So I can't take all the credit for this.
So I find that interesting. You said training snakes. To my knowledge, snakes aren't a domesticated animal. And if Siegfried and Roy, who is the Las Vegas act? Completely slipping my mind that they had the tigers. Do you recall? Well,
no.
We learned that you really cannot train wild animals. There'll always be wild animals. How does she train snakes?
So you can train anything. So it's very, 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 very easy across a large array of species. So basically with any species, the way it learns is that they perform an action, and that action or that behavior has a consequence, and that is either desirable or beneficial, or it is detrimental to the animal, and then they decide whether they're going to repeat it or not. So it's with associative learning techniques that we can get them to do training. So operant conditioning and things like that, where you will give them something to do, and if they do the behavior that you want, you reward that and reinforce that with a reward. People do it with everything: whale sharks, snakes, tigers, bears, chimpanzees. People are doing it with jumping spiders. It's nothing new, really.
Okay, so it's basically you use positive reinforcement, consequences, rewards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did dog training, but I never fathomed that we could train animals like snakes. And it is Siegfried and Roy. I was looking it up. I don't know how I got into fraudulism there, but it is Siegfried and Roy, who had the tigers that they lived with, and one day were attacked by their own tigers that they've had since cubs that were extremely well trained and an act that was performed hundreds of times, if not thousands of times in Las Vegas, but yet it still acted based on its animal instincts.
Well, just because you train something doesn't mean it foregoes all instinct. It just means
Correct.
that they have something they've learned that they can get reinforcement from.
So when we're talking about instinct, and I think that has somewhat to do with this study, was there a study conducted? Is this theoretical? Is this empirical? What is the basis of this study or the information? Where did the information come that's being provided for this topic?
So basically, what it is basically a systematic review as also like a presentation. Basically, that's the basically the methodology you've gone with. So it studies going back all the way like 30 years and collating that information and presenting it obviously to keepers in a way that obviously doesn't fit the mainstream narrative, but that is the information that's been there for 30 years. It just hasn't seeped into like the herp community, like as in like normal keepers. But in terms of the professional environment of like zoos and whatnot, it's bog standard across the board. So all we did was take all this information and recent studies that have gone into bull pythons, placing them in racks and then vivariums, and brought that all that information together and then presented it all in one go.
So it's more of a review than based on scientific studies that are out there, so we would have access. Is this more in general to the reptile, or is there any specifics to the ball python in itself?
Yes, both. So basically what we did in the talk is we needed to set up an understanding with the audience what learning is and the underlying mechanics of learning, and that what neuroplasticity is, and then we made sure that everyone understood that this is what happens in the brain across the board. There isn't a species studied that hasn't worked this way. This is what the brain does. Every representation of each group, so like reptiles, mammals, invertebrates, bees, and like sea slugs are the same. So that's how the brain works. And we also have studies where they've also placed the raw pythons in racks and then vivariums, and the same things that come with neuroplasticity and learning happened in this study, as well as obviously many studies in snakes showing that enrichment causes higher cognition and learning. And obviously by virtue, if the snake can learn, it can also atrophy in terms of neural pathways if given no opportunity to exercise its brain.
Well, doesn't any animal adapt to its environment as a in an attempt to survive? Don't we adapt to our environment? Aren't there like centuries of studies proving that all animals will adapt to their environment or become extinct?
Yes, so you have learning as a part of being in that environment with like social mapping and things like that, learning where resources are, learning where game trails are and things like that. You learn skill sets to survive in that environment. That's all a part of neuroplasticity. Did you want me to go into what neuroplasticity is rather than just repeat?
No, I don't think we have to go into it, because I will have your links in the video description. So if people wanted to get into it more in depth, they can go watch the video. I know that you have a 30-minute video, and then you also have it in more manageable
chunks,
segments.
yeah.
I would just recommend that anyone that is serious about formulating an opinion, that they go and they see the extended version, because that has more of the meat and potatoes, let's just say, than just the sound bites, which kind of draw others in to want to see. But there's no denying the amount of people that have seen the sound bites or the more manageable bites, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Those that have seen those more manageable bites, there's no comparison in numbers to those that have actually watched the extended version.
Yeah.
So do you feel, or rather, do you think that the information is being disseminated as intended if more people are just watching the sound bites than watching the actual extended version?
Well, if you only watch an excerpt, which is a minute and a half of a 30-minute talk, you naturally aren't going to get the full comprehensive understanding of the whole topic. So if someone hasn't gone through from part 1 obviously to part 6, and then it will feed you into the large talk, obviously you're not going to get a larger understanding. But the initial purpose was that it's a 30-minute talk. You come across that on YouTube and someone goes, 30 minutes, you're all right, mate. But if they see something that's a minute and they watch it and they go, oh, that was quite interesting, oh, it's part 2, oh, that was interesting as well, oh, that's part 3, it's a minute, okay, I'll watch it, oh, that was interesting, oh, I'll just watch the full talk. And that was the tactic I went with, to try and get people to go into the full talk. But whether people actually bothered to do that or not is obviously
that was the intent. I can see the thought process there. Based on this systematic review, what was done? What type of study was done to provide this information? Do we have numbers? How many animals were tested? How many years were these tests conducted? Where can we go and see these studies?
So if you want to go see first of all, if you go to the full talk video on YouTube, there's a whole, the pinned comment is the full comprehensive list of references. But if you wanted to go to the study where ball pythons were put in racks and then into vivariums, that was a sample size of 35 animals.
Okay, so that seems like a small sample to have empirical data.
Well, people would say so. But when you think of that in terms of an actual animal husbandry study where they put animals into 4-foot vivariums, that's 35 4-foot vivariums that needs to be in a room that's temperature controlled, so that there's a controlled variable. They all need to be in there at the same time, so you can't even repeat it like each cycle that you get through, because that would be a different time of year. So when you think about how much needs to be controlled for, it's not exactly a small sample size. And then when we compare that to other things with less sample size in studies, and people were perfectly happy with that, and obviously it's been through peer review and things like that, and it's not such a large issue, then it's not exactly a tiny sample size by comparison. And then we get into like stat analysis. So you use stat analysis to obviously see whether the data is up to chance. So when you do certain analysis, you get like a p-value. So in biology, you get a p-value. If it's less than 0.05, that means it's up to less than 5% chance that data is like up to chance. So it really gets put through the ringer to be whether it is significant data or not. So when you're seeing a study that says something is significant, that's not because they're just using that as a descriptor of like it's just more. Significant means it's past the stat analysis to say that it is less than 5% up to chance.
I mean, I've seen studies for decades where when you look at the verbiage that's used to describe, you will see a lot of non-definitive terminology. I remember studies in college, and I'm going back almost 30 years, which is when I started keeping reptiles, and studies about marijuana, where today, 30 years later, everything that was posed as hypotheticals and possibly and can have been disproved. So in your video, I did notice that a lot of the terminology wasn't definitive and does leave room for ambiguity.
That's just speaking scientifically. If you speak in definitives as in academia, then you're doing it wrong. You always speak if like this data suggests, or this could be, or should be. You don't talk in definitives this in absolutes. If you're talking in absolutes in academia, then you are not doing it right.
Okay,
science is about learning.
No, I definitely understand that. Even to today, with the tobacco industry, although there is so much empirical data, you still see the way things are written that can cause this type of harm, can do this, etc., because it doesn't happen to 100% of the people. Just like a condom will not protect you 100%, but it is 99.9% if used correctly. Now, I can agree with you that, and I wasn't aware of this, and I will check the cited sources, but a sample size of 35, when in comparison, you use Canova as a reference point, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he would have a sample size of tens of thousands of animals over 2 decades. How do you compare what he's done and the results that he's had to a study of 35 animals? And how long was this study?
So I believe it was 6 weeks or 6 months. It was six something, but I'll have to go back to refamiliarize with the timescale. But in terms of Canova, first of all, I know everyone's like, "Oh, I called out Canova." What I actually did was just go to YouTube, ball python in rack, and then screenshot the first video that came up. It just so happened to be Canova. And obviously, when I'm giving a talk, I cited, where I got the screenshot from, and I was like, "Yeah, this Canova image." I didn't realize I was calling out Canova, but apparently it's done now. So there we go. But in terms of what you're saying, a sample size of Canova.
Well, before you move on, I think that's a perfect person because he is definitely an authority in the ball python world. He's done it for more than 2 decades and literally for tens of thousands of animals. So if anyone's to be cited, I think that's a great person for you, even if it was just serendipity that pulled him up as your first sample. But that's back to my question, comparing someone that's done this for 2 decades with tens of thousands of ball pythons specifically to a study of 35 ball pythons in 6 weeks. Doesn't that seem a little unfair?
No, because one's a study and one is not. So when you do a study, well, in this paper, basically they did ethograms. Do you know what ethograms are?
No, please.
So when you do an ethogram, you obviously note down all the possible behaviors and a descriptor of what each behavior is. Then it's predefined. Then you go into, because they film these animals over 24 hours, like constantly. They scrub through the footage to the time scales, time frames and whatnot, and they actually use descriptors to identify which behavior was which, and then what percentage of time that was expressed for, and things like that. So it's going through the scientific method. So yes, I agree that Canova has a lot of experience, but he's not doing a study. It's not been through statistical analysis. It's not peer reviewed. It's not gone through the scientific method. And also it comes down to individual interpretations as well. Like when you go back to my full talk, when I'm saying about not knowing what's the underlying parts of like neuroplasticity and what happens in deprived environments, and that how that causes the amygdala to be the more strengthened part, and hippocampus, which controls the context of fear, being being impaired. You have to know what's going on under the hood, otherwise you can misinterpret like feeling more secure in the rack compared to a vivarium as being, oh, the rack is better. What I'm saying is it's hard without saying Canova doesn't know neuroplasticity and things like that, but it's not the same as the scientific method is what I'm trying to say.
I definitely understand it, but my thing is whether I keep data, right? I've run statistical government operations. Actually, I ran operations for the largest data collecting government agency in the world. I've been studied by other countries for what I've done with data collection. So I keep my own data on my animals, anywhere from feed, comparing rodents. I keep data on the temperatures. Now, long story short, I don't need to understand certain things to understand what benefits the animal more. Now, I'm not speaking rack versus vivarium. I'm speaking temperatures. I'm speaking humidity. I'm speaking food response. So I don't have anything connected to the snake's brain to know any of this information. But I can tell you this: if we're talking ball pythons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a balled up little snake that stays up in a ball most of the time. Obviously, not all of the time, but it seems extremely comfortable balled up the majority of its day. Okay. Whether it's in a vivarium, whether it's in a tub, whether it's in a glass tank. If you have hides, you'll normally find that snake balled up under a hide in any of those scenarios. I don't need data to see that. But I can tell you that if temperatures rise, you'll normally see the snake extended opposed to being balled up because the temperature, and it's a way to cool off. Just like if you find a ball python in the wild that is out, it may be basking on a rock because it's thermal regulating for whatever reason. Its temperatures weren't where it wants to be naturally. When we're looking at this information, it just seems to still be in its infancy for us to make a difference. Like, for example, of the 35 animals, what was the age range of the different animals used for this sampling? Were they all hatchlings? Were they? Because I would imagine that there could be variances even within the different age groups of a snake or a ball python more specifically.
So it was mostly sub-adult and adult, and obviously both sexes as well. And when they did this, they obviously got them particularly for the study.
Now, where they got them from for the study, wouldn't that also affect these animals because they have been influenced by however they were housed prior to the study?
Yes.
So then, even in that case, if they all were not, if they were not acquired from the same source with the same husbandry, with the same keeping, even that would create a variance within the animals.
So that is actually really interesting. So basically what they got, most of them was, I believe, from rescues. They would have been from a myriad of different experiences. So if you were to place animals if they had got them all from one place that were kept in the exact same way, and then they were all in long-term deprivation, you may see different results where you wouldn't see such expressing of behaviors initially when going to the vivarium. It's most likely that these animals came from, if they come from rescue, generally they probably came from pet homes. I think that's quite probable. And then they would have had a myriad of past learning experiences in their past, and lots of different neural pathways built up in response to different stimulation and different experiences. So when you take an animal that knows enrichment and stimulation and you place that into a deprived state like they were put into that rack, there was a lot of stress behaviors. And that is because when you take enrichment and things away from the animal that it knows, it causes a lot of stress in that animal. And that is something that is well conserved across vertebrates. That isn't just talking about Python regius, and the Python regius is no exception to that rule. So if you had to take animals that were just kept in a rack all its life and had nothing, and put that in that rack, would that animal have actually just sat there like it might have done before? Or if it was from a blacked out tub and then put into that clear tub like it was in the study, would they have been stressed or intrigued? It all depends on how the animal was raised, and that's why we're going into talking about like why it makes a difference how it's raised, because stimulation creates higher cognition, deprivation creates neural atrophy of pathways. So that's the difference. So you may have a completely different result if you put like animals that were from a deprived state and you put them into that study. They may have been far less expressive in things initially when put straight into the vivarium.
Well, I think the other factor that we look at is that if the majority of those 35 animals came from rescues, they were already highly stressed animals. They started out highly stressed because if they came from rescues, that means that there's been transportation quite a few times, and usually pet homes more often than not, the reality is, have improper husbandry. It's very rare that you find someone keeping an animal in a glass tank actually meeting that animal's best husbandry scenarios, and that's the reason why a lot of the time the behavior affects that. You claimed that the response that often if an animal goes off feed, it's not because of their current situation, it's because of where the situation they came from. Did I understand that correctly?
So I said when you take an animal that is set up in a rack, like in that deprived state, and you put it in a vivarium that is set up perfectly, it still can struggle because a new environment of new stimulus is still a stressor, and it's not necessarily what the stressor is, but that animal's ability to cope with stress when it's gone through a state of deprivation, and you've got a amygdala, which is a part of the brain that is responsible for fear response. If that is the one that is strengthened, but the hippocampus that regulates the context of said fear is impaired, you placing that in that vivarium is a hard transition. It's going to cause mass stress. So, and then within my talk as well, I said an improper setup of vivarium will also exacerbate the issue. So it isn't to do with if it's set up correctly in the vivarium or not. If we said in a scenario where the vivarium is set up perfectly, that issue can still occur because of what's happened long term in a state of sensory deprivation.
I mean, I think that the only way to really have more accurate data would be with a larger sampling size and to start the study from birth. It would have to be from the actual hatchling, and one going, or whatever set number going into the vivarium with the ideal temperature and humidity, and also going into a rack system with the same ideal temperature and humidity, and then comparing the differences with enrichment, etc. I think that would be a more accurate study than grabbing animals from rescues, which have different practices. And today, I'm not sure of these rescues, and I'm not discrediting these rescues, but here in America, anyone that's willing to take in a free ball python claims to be a rescue. And we see that rampant over here, where everyone claims that they're a rescue. Please send me your sick animals, where it's almost like a ploy for them to just get free animals so they can breed and become mega millionaires off of animals they'll never make money off of, and then shortly after they're discarding the animals as well. I think it's a tough pill to swallow. One of the things I've learned in 30 years of keeping reptiles is different reptiles do things differently, just like any other animal or any other species. Would you agree with that?
Different individuals within the same species.
Yes.
Yes. And that goes back into different learning experiences and neural pathways and learning.
So if an animal was in its natural environment, its learning experiences are going to pretty much be all for one reason, and that's survival. It's not like our learning experiences, where we have learning experiences for survival, but then also recreation, for pleasure. An animal's natural learning experience in its natural environment is just for survival. So doesn't that play a factor in having them? No, you cannot compare, right, the livelihood of an animal, we'll use ball python, where its life expectancy should be 20 to 30 years in captivity under the proper husbandry, proper temperatures, proper humidity, compared to a ball python in its natural environment, just because of all the other factors involved. You mentioned that they eat birds, that they'll climb the trees and eat birds. I think you would climb a tree and eat birds if that was your only food source, because there was a lack of your primary food source. Would you not, as a human being?
So what you're saying is the reason they would express more behaviors in the wild is because it's a survival must, and not because of any.
I would say more often than not, because if I were a ball python, I would not want to climb into a tree and increase the risk of being eaten by another predator, such as a larger bird or some other type of predator, because I was just going there to eat. When if the food was readily available, rodent versus bird, do you think a ball python would climb a tree and go after the bird if there were a rodent there?
Well, by that logic, then why do they? Because the rodents are readily available, yet they do climb up and
Not
get birds.
necessarily. It could. There's other factors as well. They can be forced to go into the trees because of flooding, or wherever their natural habitat has been affected by many things. It could be affected by human contact, that forces them. Me climbing a tree would not make me arboreal, and trust me, with my short legs and heavy body, the last thing I want to do is climb a tree. But if climbing that tree meant survival, I'm climbing the tree. I think that an animal with its natural instincts would do the same. It wouldn't necessarily mean that that animal is arboreal.
Any species can be said to do something that isn't necessarily classing it as semi-arboreal, but when they spend we're shifting on to whether it's arboreal or not. The idea is with neuroplasticity being detrimental in sensory deprivation. I can see how we're slightly shifting, and I'm not saying that to call you out or anything. I'm just saying that we're just naturally via conversation shifting.
Well, what
on
I'm
topic a little
shifting
bit.
is that an animal is going to do, regardless of its brain's capabilities, is going to do what it needs to do to survive. And what a ball python needs to do to survive is to eat and stay out of a predator's way. And that's how come they usually burrow with one entry point, one exit point. That way they feel more secure, which when we mimic that behavior, whether it's in a vivarium, whether it's a glass tank, whether it's a tub, when you mimic that behavior, that's when they feel more secure, and you're usually going to have better responses across the board. I heard you mention having a hide in a rack. Okay. I am in full agreement with you, where many don't understand where I'm coming from when I've been contacted with people that are having issues with their animals' responses, whether it's food response or anything else or other behavior that they're demonstrating. I go through a checklist of different things. And that's one of the things I usually ask. Do they have a hide? Because that mimics that behavior of where they burrow in their natural environments, and makes them feel more secure. The more secure the animal is, the better their responses are. So I'm not really shifting away. I'm just showing that a ball python's natural learning process may be done the same as every other animal, but what a ball python needs to learn is not the same thing that a green tree
Okay. So security needs are met by the burrow, right? So I agree with you that a large motivator in the wild is survival, and resources are outside of that burrow. Therefore, they're highly motivated to go outside, right? So when we take them into captivity and we basically eliminate those variables of, we give them the rat in the rack, we give them the water in the rack, we give them the warm spot in the rack, we bring mates to them in the rack. So why would they come out?
That sounds like a pretty damn good life for a ball python.
Okay, yeah, right. So open all the racks, walk away, come in the next morning. How many are still in the racks?
I think that depends on many factors.
Exactly. But if all the variables and the needs of the animal are met in the rack, like we're saying in the burrow is in the wild, that they don't need to leave, but only because of survival. Well, if survival needs are met in the rack and you open them, why do they leave? Because there's things to do and learn about outside.
But that's not that again, like I run an ambient room, and if I leave a rack open, quite often the snake is still in the rack. If I leave it, they'll be exactly where they were when I left it open. There are times that I'll go back and the drawer was open, and I'm just like, I left the drawer open and it's curled up in the corner and it's hide. Quite often they don't even come out of their hide, so they're not even exploring. So again, I think it's very difficult when we don't have enough of a sampling size to claim it to be empirical. I think most of what we're discussing, and I will say this, I appreciate these conversations because we don't learn, right? I will tell you this, I have learned much in these 3 decades by trial and error, and I wish there was more information out there. Unfortunately, when I was in college, we were just starting the internet. We didn't have information at our fingertips. I also think that an animal that can survive for 20 to 30 years in captivity, based off of certain practices. Although certain data may not have been kept, it should be respected that they have thrived more under those practices, because you'll see one of the things I hate hearing is when someone tells me that they're same thing. They're new at this. They just started doing this for a few years, and their animal just suddenly died at 8 years old, or just suddenly died at 10 years old. Well, it didn't just suddenly die. A ball python's not going to tell you you're stressing me out playing with me an hour, 2 hours every day. They're very tolerant animals, but the stress creates other issues. And just like a human being, when we're overly stressed, we have physical reactions. So does a ball python and any other animal. The difference is we can express our stress. We can go get checked on our stress. When it comes to a ball python, quite often it's too late before one realizes how much they've stressed that animal out. And that's why, for me, it's difficult. And my intent in this conversation was not to denounce your video, was not to denounce the study, but was to have everyone, because what happens is when there's difference of opinions, and I'm sure you've already experienced it in the short time since you posted the video, when there's difference of opinion, it immediately creates a division where I think we all end up losing when that division is created, because when people aren't fully aware or don't do their own research and have their own experiences, they choose a side, right? Just like everything else in the world, they choose a side. And when they choose the side, they're not willing to learn. And I'll tell you this, what I do today is not what I did 30 years ago. Okay, what I did with my daughter as an infant had already changed 14 years later when my son was born. We were taught one thing: always put your child face down in the crib. Then after there were so many sudden deaths, we were taught put your child in the crib on their back, right? So I think that this is part of the process of advancing the knowledge and learning how we could all do better. Because I think, like I said, I'm in full agreement when you say to put a hide in a rack. I'm in full agreement. It just increases the sense of security for that animal, and you get a better response. I just hope that these studies continue so we can one day say that this is what the data is showing. I just don't think that we're there yet. But I do appreciate you having the balls, no pun intended. I guess pun intended. To have these conversations and to get these conversations going. And I just hope that more people will listen and see for themselves what works best. But until we have sample sizes that are larger, until we have variances from the different ages, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, right? Because these studies cost a lot of money.
The problem with that is that it's very easy for a lot of people to be like, oh, if the sample size isn't big enough, done. It is, when you look at actual animals, it's relative. So when we look at actual animal studies in relation to husbandry, 35 isn't a small sample size. It's only when you go to other studies, we look at 2,000 in social studies, or like you're looking at medical studies where like really gigantic sample sizes is like, that's where like we want it to be. When we're looking at husbandry studies, we're not talking with massive studies. So when we look at the blood D3 synthesis in studies looking at corn snakes or Burmese pythons, the sample size of that was like 18, and then the Burn paper was 4. And when you look at Dave Kaufman's video, everyone loved Dave Kaufman's video. There was plenty of people.
I didn't love it.
Okay. So we'll have an interesting conversation about this in a minute. But most people in the community loved it, and they lauded it as like this amazing thing. I think you'll know where I'm going with this anyway. But that had a sample size of 4 animals. He found 4 animals, and 2 of them were outside. One was on the move, and then one was actually sat outside its burrow basking. But if that is a really good video and everyone loves it, surely the sample size of 35 is far better than 4.
No, see, that's why I can't make that. I can't accept that argument, only because he's an entertainer and he's not doing it from a scientific point of view. He's doing it to get views on YouTube, and I don't think that that's your goal. I think your goal, whether I agree with you or not, I think your goal is to share this information and show a different perspective based on your review. Because I wouldn't, honestly, at a sample size of 35, it's hard to call it a research project. It's more of a review, just like you said, based off of a lot of possibilities. Right now, we're still in what seems to be a very theoretical stage of this study. And I think that a lot more factors have to be, a lot more testing has to be done to make it empirical and to say that you're going to get a better response. Because in today's day, I know that food response, and you're saying that there's different factors, but you don't have too many people with their animals in rack systems asking for help compared to those that have their animals in tanks or vivariums. And then there's so much, I hate to put it out there, but a lot of these ball python keepers are about as bright as the ball python. So to try to run a vivarium setup is a high demand for someone. And if you look at a lot of the people that are creating their own do-it-yourself systems, etc., it's scary, and the animal is going up against all odds, unfortunately. But is there anything you would like to share before we wrap it up? And again, I want to thank you for joining me and having this conversation. I want to thank you for continuing to push the sciences to study ball pythons. I think that they're an amazing animal, and we're still learning so much about them that in 30 years, I'll be the last person to say that he is an authority. I look to gain more knowledge every single day. But before we wrap it up, is there anything you'd like to share?
No more to share. I think that going over the sample size, that it's not a small sample size. Nothing about that study was theoretical. That was practical methodology. That was an experiment. So none of that was theory. There's lots of stuff we've gone through here where lots of things that I was going to latch upon, but we spoke about lots of things at once and we just kind of left it trail. But it was an interesting conversation nevertheless. Thank you for giving me the time. And
I don't think I don't think this topic is gonna end anytime soon. I think that this will be a hot topic for some time. And anytime people are talking about ball pythons, to me, is a good time. And again, it brings more attention to this species that is very, very understudied and underappreciated. So for that, I appreciate what you brought to the table.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, Leon. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. And I monitored the chat, and I think there were a lot of good comments being made in the chat. I also think there were a lot of idiotic comments being made in the chat. So you probably didn't see me putting those up. One of the things that I've learned is I don't know everything. I know you might think I know everything because I come across like I know everything, but I've learned that I don't. And the second you think you know everything and you're not willing to hear out other perspectives is the second you've already started to fail. Now, what works for one may not work for all. I wasn't going to keep harping on it. Obviously, it rubbed him the wrong way when we talked about sampling size and We have PhDs in the chat. Scary, right? Scary. You know, you have doctors that join our conversations here that agree that there's just a lot of room to get better information. There was no control. Where these animals came from, the state of the animals, where you got them from. Now, when we're talking about neuroplasticity, then yes, I get it. There is the ability for an animal's brain to atrophy after not being stimulated, but we don't know what's causing that stimulation. If you're feeding your animal in a timely manner, opening up the tubs, many people don't just have them in the tubs; they take them out. You know, I recommend you handle your animal at least twice a week for 20 minutes, but not to overhandle them because that creates stress. So there's just so much that there is no way a study with 35 animals in 6 weeks is going to change my mind or many people's minds. Um, and an animal is going to let you know if it's doing well based on certain responses, food response, etc. My reason for explaining why I could leave a tub open, and obviously I'm not leaving 100 tubs open because that will create a whole bunch of other issues. Yes, animals will leave a tub to seek another animal in the tub because they may want to mate, right? But the primary reason why an animal will leave its environment, whether it's a tub or a tank, right? You have animals that are rubbing their heads and noses in tanks trying to get out, or vivariums. The reason why a ball python would try to leave is there's something wrong, and most likely it's not adequate heat. And whenever you have a lost animal, you're most likely going to find that animal by a heat source. It's common knowledge. Anyone that's ever lost an animal, I go through a whole list of things. Could they have escaped the room? If they did escape the room, go look behind your refrigerator. Go look behind your deep freezer. You know, they generate heat, and the animals are attracted to the heat. It's very basic knowledge. Now, if they're temperatures and husbandry and they're not seeking to mate or they're not looking for food, they're going to stay right where they are. And this is not ideology. This is based off of many years of keeping these animals. But I want to thank you all for joining us and keeping an open mind, right? Because if anyone here has been doing this for more than 2 decades, you can't lie, and you will admit that you're not doing things today the way you were doing it 20 years ago, right? You're not buying 2 tanks at the pet shop, getting hustled to buy 2 tanks because you're supposed to move to feed, right? Trial and error. We live, we learn. Great question. Return to the Max says, is there any reason Liam didn't join us live? He's in England where he wasn't able. This is the middle of his workday, and I just wanted to get this on sooner than later. And I don't think the live would have changed much. We would have just heard the same things over and over again. So, but great question. This was the middle of his workday, and he would have been available tomorrow, and I wasn't changing the hump day show that we have for 116 weeks. Awesome interview, Leviathan Snakes. I think there was a ton of flaws in the methodology and that Liam didn't seem to want to accept, and that is okay. We can chalk that off to young enthusiasm, right? And again, you couldn't tell me anything at 25 years old. I knew more than everyone, so it took me a long time to realize I didn't know anything. So that's where it's at. Wait, where's the microphone? It's right here. So yes, for those of you that were on the show yesterday, I'm sure you found it entertaining. I will be hooking it up soon. As I mentioned, when I started this whole podcast thing, and I mentioned it on my guest appearance on Snakes and the Fat Man's Leveling Up, you know, I use my wife's laptop. You know, you have these people with all this technology and they have the microphone set up, they have like this whole studio look, etc. And the content is trash. And my goal was always to bring you good content, decent content, right? Because I guess it's not everyone's cup of tea. And to kind of make fun of the whole podcast world, where you can get the greatest microphone, you can get the greatest webcam, have the greatest setup, and still suck. Okay. And with my viewers, and I always say it, I have the best viewers. I did promise that in 2023. So my wife actually bought me all the stuff for Christmas, and I just never set it up. So I just used it as props for yesterday's show. I thought you guys would find that funny, but I would never introduce it on another show before bringing it to you. So I will set everything up and it will be featured. And then you tell me, is it better? Then you can tell me if it's better or not. Okay. This is the type of conversation that is used to pass legislation against keeping by people who have anything and everything above a GED, but helps an argument for PETA and groups against animals. And I think that's what we have to worry about. Okay. I think we have to worry about the fact that if we just accept what's being said because scientific terminology is being used to promote a narrative, there is a narrative there. Okay. Just like any study. I joke around and for the last few weeks, I've been binge watching Big Bang Theory. Okay. I'm a huge Sheldon fan. I've been binge watching Big Bang Theory. And in 12 years, I think they proved one thing, and it was by accident. Okay. So these are guys with PhDs and academia through the nose. Of course, it's a show, but there's reality to it, right? Where people live their livelihoods trying to prove something and never proving it. And for me, what proves it, again, are the responses from the animals. And there is no question about it that more people have issues trying to maintain a vivarium or keeping animals in a tank when it comes to food response. And when pushing the narrative, if you watch the 30-minute video, you will see that there's agreement that when putting the animals in a vivarium, there's issues with eating, but then they blame it on the animal adjusting coming from the rack system. But when you take an animal from a tank or that situation, you put it in a rack, usually you have an immediate change of response and they start eating. So that's basic, and it doesn't require a study to see, oh, wait, the animal eats better when it feels secure. Okay, so if you transition one way and it has an issue, it's blamed on the animal being in the rack system prior. But then what explains the fact when you reverse that and transition to a rack or a tub, the animal eats immediately? It's very, very easy to say. I must say, Brian, you are a hell of an interviewer. Pin hats off to you, my man. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate that, Billy. Like I said, #Q, put out the info, let the keepers decide what they want to try in their collections without belittling and forcing that opinion on keepers like they are the gods of bulls. So, guys, I've said it many times, and I think that you need to keep an open mind. And we talk about division, right? We have enough issues. Look at all the alerts we have going on from USR. There's enough division in this community. We don't have to agree with other people's methodology. When Jason and I did the Friday show, The Keeper's Corner, we shared our best practices where he and I didn't always agree. And we shared best practices of established keepers. They needed at least 3 years of keeping or breeding experience to share their best practices. We did the day in the life and how they did things. And the whole point was to show that there can be different paths to the same destination. And the destination we want is the good livelihood of these animals. So as long as what you're practicing gets that result, more power to you. Okay. These debates will always continue. live versus frozen or recently killed. Tank vivarium versus tub rack, ASF versus Norwegian, arboreal, semi-arboreal, non-arboreal. These conversations will always take place, and it's good that they're taking place because it just means that we are all on the same page as far as trying to find out what's best for these animals. You guys are in agreement with Billy. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But again, keep an open mind. I don't think we should confuse enrichment or stimulation with practices that stress out a ball python. Okay, all brains need stimulation. I think what we're confusing is the fact that different animals are stimulated differently, right? Even in human beings, I may like to watch television, you may like to read books, I may like to just be a couch potato, you may like to go on hikes in the mountains. The key is stimulation, but not stress. And I think a lot of the things that are considered stimulation are contrary to what a ball python wants in its natural habitat. So don't confuse stressing out your animal with stimulating your animal. I will never take a ball python out for a walk. It's not a dog. Okay. So that's just some of the things to keep in mind. All right. And whenever a ball python is acting outside of its natural characteristics, there's something wrong. All right. When I see my animals outside of their hides, the first thing I do is check the hide, and guess what? I usually find a nice log in there. They don't want to be in there because it's dirty. So there's usually a reason why the animal is not acting based on the characteristics we know. When you get a dog, every dog breed has certain characteristics, and you have to understand that. It's no different with reptiles. Guys, I hope you have a great day. Thank you all for joining. Please continue to keep an open mind. And I really, really, really hope we learn something from this. Okay. Don't have to agree, but learn. Fake microphone for the win. The microphone's real, just not hooked up. The mic is real. But look how cool that is, right? Look at that. Woo, woo, look at that, dude. I just don't want it to block my face. Okay. I got dimples. Don't want it to block. But guys, have a great, great, great rest of your week. It's hump day. Crush your goals. Remember, today's a great, great day to crush your goals. If you're behind, it's okay. Do what you got to do to jumpstart it. Next week, BC Balls will be on the show. If you haven't met BC Balls, join us next week, and we're going to be talking about some of his experiences on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Are you trying to tell me something, Brian? I don't know. Who knows? Luke is the new Sheldon. I thought I already told you, Billy, you don't know what you're doing because you should have 4,000 vivariums at your location. All right, guys, have a great rest of your week, and thank you again for joining. And don't forget to check us out, guys, every not next Tuesday, the Tuesday after. We'll be back. I'll be back up there with Crocodile Dundee and the Fat Man. Have a good one, everybody. Oh, I forgot to show Holly.